I'm David Igneri. I'll be 70 next July 4th. I'm sort of falling apart, but my demise has been greatly exaggerated. I was a public school teacher for 33 years. I did GED for a year. Very rewarding because you help people who never graduated high school to do that. I had a lot of graduates from that course. And then for 6.5 years, I was an American and European history professor. I taught at 3 colleges. I taught at Dowling College, Long Island University, and recently they needed a history professor in a week. They couldn't find anybody, and I did Briarcliff for a few semesters. However, maybe the most important thing I ever did, much more important than the classes I taught in public school, and probably more important than college courses that I taught, or the degrees I got, or the physical things I did, was that I lifeguarded for 42 summers and 7 winters. I came out of retirement and guarded pools for a while, about 12, 15 years ago, when all those kids were drowning all over the country. It was in the papers every day. A young kid had drowned in a pool. So I said to my wife, you know, Elizabeth, you know, maybe I'll guard pools for a while. And she said, why? I said, well, they're going to probably welcome me, and maybe I'll stop some of these deaths. Public pools, private pools, backyard pools, we're losing children. In William Henry Babcock's book, he alludes to her death, okay? He alludes to her great beauty, how all the braves wanted to cohabit with her, marry her, whatever. But he doesn't mention anything about the drownings. None! He doesn't mention it once. Anyway, the Princess RONKONKOMA, Tuscawanta, fell in love with this blonde-haired, 6-foot Englishman. He was a woodcutter. He sold wood to people for the winter, for, you know, to heat their homes. And he also was supposedly some kind of surveyor. There's no proof for Tuscawanta or ILIOU Birdsall, but a large Birdsall family lived closer to New York City, in probably the present-day Queens area. And it would have been in the early 1600s, middle 1600s, would have been very easy for some Birdsalls to move out to Suffolk County, and there is a good possibility that ILIOU Birdsall was real flesh and blood man. Oh, so the princess and you have this affair, okay? They both tell each other how much they love each other, and according to the legend, the medicine man or Tuscawanta's father or whatever prevented them from seeing each other after a certain time. And for 7 years, Tuscawanta sent messages written on birch bark to you, who was living on the Connecticut River 4 miles away from Lake Ronkonkoma. Now, this would assume that the lake was connected to the Connecticut River, but the natives believed that all the bodies of water were connected. The Great South Bay, the Long Island Sound, the Connecticut River, all the lakes, they were all connected somehow. So finally she sent a message to you that she was so forlorn that she hadn't seen him in 7 years, that she was going to paddle her canoe to the middle of the lake and commit suicide the next day. And supposedly she stuck a knife in her heart. Some say that she actually tied rocks onto her legs, all kinds of stories, and that she committed suicide. But being dead and not being able to see you again, she put a great curse on the lake that males would drown, women would survive. And she would make love to some of these men in depth. In fact, the story has even gone this far that every summer Tuscawanta walks around the lake on the roads as a human female.
I met her once.
And she and she was pretty cute, Frank.
Oh yeah.
But you shouldn't have gone near her.
I was too much.
Because then she veers these males into the water. She veers them into the water. And she drowns them all.
Oh, that's very pleasant.
From 1877 to the present, approximately 160 people have drowned, and I only could find one more. In my time, there were 30 drownings. One was the woman that I told you about. She died of kidney failure caused by secondary drowning. The other 29 were males. I guarded there from 1963 to 1994. So that was 32 years. In 32 years, 30 people died. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I was just, very logical, rational type of guy. This is all hokum. This is all superstition. They died during the pavilion era, sometimes 3 or 4, because there just weren't enough lifeguards. If you train your lifeguards well enough, nobody would drown. That's what I thought when I was 18 and a half, and I was offered the position of head lifeguard at Lake RONKONKOMA. I had 13 very talented, physically capable young men. By the way, in those days, young lady, girls guarded pools. They didn't have the strength to guard the beaches according to theory. So in the early years, we had no female lifeguards. They asked me because I had pretty much semi-military power. All the supervisors that I worked for. If you say it goes, Dave, it goes. Because of my youth, in 1963, they put a man with a pith helmet and a shirt and tie as beach manager, so I was actually second in charge. But he wasn't a lifeguard. He did the schedules, he did the timesheets, stuff like that. A very nice fellow, by the way. He walked around the beach, talking to people, are there any complaints? You want to talk to me? Blah, blah, blah. I was in charge of the guards. Okay. Now, I didn't see the forest from the trees. I wasn't quite 19. I had 3 or 4 rescues on the pay the year before. I mean, it was on the job training. But I took it, and I decided to do the best I could. But the drownings continued. Okay? We rescued everybody we could, but the drownings continued. In 1963, my first year on the lake, 3 boys took a boat out somewhere past Lighthouse, hundreds of yards away from us. The boat capsized in a very rough day of water. Part of the legend, by the way, which I didn't mention, was that the princess uses the weather to help drown these. She either creates the weather or she uses the weather, but a lot of the drownings occur when the lake is rough. Even though the lake is only a mile by 3/4, the wind picks up and you actually have some waves on the lake sometimes. So anyway, these 3 boys were on a boat that capsized, holding on for dear life, far from us, maybe 500 or 600 yards from us. A chunky female lifeguard, she was built. She was at Lighthouse. She swam out and saved one of the boys. The second boy was a decent swimmer. He made it in. The third boy was a poor swimmer, and I had sent my lifeguards out, and I followed them. We had no surfboards on the lake at that time. We didn't even have buoys on the lake because buoys were expensive. The municipalities would give them to the ocean guards and the sound guards. So we had none of them. We were no more than 100 yards away from the third boy, and he went down in front of us in that 70 foot of water. We, of course, tried our best to dive down. It was useless. That was on July 4th, 1963. My birthday is July 4th, so I was 19.
Oh.
Rumors spread that he was found, the body was found in the Connecticut River. He was found in the Sound. He was found in the Bay. He never drowned. We just made it up. All kinds of stuff. On August 4th, 1963, I got there early, and his body was on the beach. Eaten by the fish, by the way. I don't want to hardly recognizable. Now, according to the locals, people who know the lake, and I didn't know the lake at that time, he probably got tangled in the many weeds that are 6, 7, 8, 9 feet long in that deep hole off Lighthouse. And before the body came free, it took a month. And then gradually I learned from geologists and other people that a body will stay down for every 4 feet 1 day. So if it's 70 feet, it's going to be about a month. Okay? If it was only 8 feet, he'd probably stay down 2 days. So I didn't know any of this. See, I was learning. See, the only thing that I had at that point in my life, I didn't have any real experience. I shouldn't have been in charge. I only had a few rescues. I was in great shape. There was no question about that. As strong as an ox and as quick as a cat. But the thing that I realized is I'd have to learn more. So, even though I wasn't too good of a student, Rockport State accepted me into education. And I began my 4 years at Rockport in elementary ed and second major in social science. I wasn't much of a student, but I was trying. And that's when I met Harry Kroll. He was a little Jewish man about my size. And Harry was a very excellent student. We became friends. A little bigger than me, and built a little bigger than me. He was meticulous, and he had about a 3.9 very quickly at Rockport. He was also a power lifter. Okay, for a man his size, probably Harry was 5'8", maybe 170 pounds, something like that. He could lift phenomenal amounts.
No.
So he said, eek. When I was a boy, I was called Dave. That's why I always identified with Crockett. And when I was adult, I was never called David. And when I was an adult, I wasn't called Igneri or Dave. I was called Ig. So he said, Ig, you'd be great. Why don't you start taking it up? And I said, why do I have to do that? I'm a runner swimmer. I don't have to do that. Sometimes you just don't see the forest from the trees. And I'm sure that's the way I was. They say that youth is wasted on the young. Anyway, it didn't take me long to realize that Harry was right. Here I would have a long lifeguard career. I would rescue 139 people. My guards would rescue approximately 3,000 people. I was a professional teacher. So to teach the lifeguards was not any different than to teach my students. Okay? I taught elementary school, as I said, for 33 years. High school for a short amount of time. GED. And I was a history professor for 6.5 years. So I taught them as I learned. When I learned, I taught them. And if the next day I found a better way of doing it, I changed my policies. Now, Teddy Roosevelt used to have the greatest minds come to Washington to advise him on any issue. I did that with my lieutenants and senior guards. Just in writing, give me your idea. I will consider it. Okay. So I started powerlifting. I realized that half the people I went out for were bigger than me. Okay? The ideal guard is 6'5", weighs 250 pounds, is a power lifter or competitive swimmer. The guy that was a governor of Minnesota, it's escaping me. Heavyweight wrestler, former competitive swimmer, power lifter, Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura. He would make the ideal, physically. Now obviously, in the early years, I didn't even realize that obviously the ability on the tower was the most important. So I talked to people who had guarded before. How do I make my guards better? How do I get better? And they told me, study the water. All the things you're doing are good, but study the water. Get to the point where you see a rescue as it's or before it's about to happen. I had this guy, and I haven't seen him in years. I'll mention his name because this is all good stuff. His name was Dennis Travis. 6'1", you know, over 200 pounds, very slow swimmer, slow runner. Okay. Good enough to guard, but, you know, he wouldn't stand out. The first year he worked for me, he had the most rescues of anybody on the beach. The second year he worked for me, he had the most rescues on the beach. The third year he had the most rescues. Something is up here. I talked to him. I started studying his methods. I'm going to teach that stuff to everybody. Okay? In practice rescues, the freestylers were the first out. Kids who were swimming in high school and college and so on. The breaststrokers were the first in. What's going on here? Breaststrokers are not as fast as freestylers. They use a frog kick. The freestylers usually use a scissor kick. There is no more powerful kick that you could use as a lifeguard than the frog kick. I began to use the frog kick. I began teaching the frog kick. You know, in other words, I wanted to be the best. I wanted my guards to be the best. Because as it says in my book, I wanted to protect and save all the people, all of the time. Now, this goes against human error, because the view in the 50s and the 60s and in the 70s, that every 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years, no matter what you did, no matter how you were, no matter how responsible you were, no matter how many rules you had to make the lifeguards better, a drowning would occur. You couldn't stop it. They called this human error. Every 7 or 8 years, somebody would make a mistake and somebody would drown. Guess what? I said, I'm fighting you in error starting today. We're not going to do that. We're not going to make those mistakes. But my greatest mistake was about to happen, and I didn't even see it coming. In 1965, I was 21 on the 4th of July. In February of 1965, I was at Rockport studying for a degree in elementary education with a minor in, well, actually a second major. I had 30-some credits in it, social science. I began to have very, very strange dreams. At first I didn't remember them, but they were very weird, and they gave me a terrible feeling. But then I asked people about dreams, and they said, Dave, you've got to, or Ig, you have to dwell on your dreams. Because if you dwell on your dreams, within a minute of you waking up, you'll remember the whole dream. This is what happens. You wake up, you're not thinking about it, and you forget about it. However, if you wake up, I got to try to remember. You'll remember it. So I began to do that. And for 7 nights in a row, in February 1965, I was still only 20. I dreamed that I was diving in deep water, that it was totally dark. I couldn't see anything. I was diving for somebody that was in trouble. I was out of air. I was getting totally disoriented and panicking. I began to hold my throat because I had no more air. I said, you got to calm yourself down, you're going to die. And then I followed my bubbles up. And when I got to the surface, firecrackers went off. I thought about my dream. Firecrackers went off. It's a dark, deep place. In 1963, I just had the lake. Because I did a good job at the lake, or a pretty good job at the lake, they gave me a few more beaches. So I traveled part of the time, and I had a lieutenant lifeguard at Lake Ronkonkoma, although my headquarters was there. This beach was only 6 feet deep. It was a bay beach. No, the dream couldn't be there. No, it's not going to happen there. This beach is 8 feet deep. It's, it's deeper, but no, the dream couldn't be happening there. So I said, the dream is about Lake Ronkonkoma. The darkness of the water, the great amount of depth, and by the firecrackers, it was going to happen on the 4th of July. I told everybody, you're crazy, Ig. Not only do you think you're the greatest guard, not only do you think you're in the best shape, not only are you in charge, now you could predict the future. You could tell about stuff that hasn't even happened yet. However, when I told the town about this, the municipality that I work for, do what you want. Move the greatest guards to the lake. And that's what I did. The fastest and the biggest and the strongest will all move to Lake Ronkonkoma. A fellow by the name of Dick Dobert, who became one of my best friends, 6'8", 300 pounds. He played professional football for the Redskins for 4 years. He got drafted out of a Division II school, Springfield College. And at that time, his size got him a pro contract. However, in the summer, Dick Dobert was my backup man. I went out first, he came out second. Bob Cubell, another big, powerful man, was at Lake Ronkonkoma. These people, I haven't spoken to Dick Dobert now in many years. I hope he's still around, but I mean, I have no idea. Anyway, 13 lifeguards that I thought were the best were put at Lake Ronkonkoma. Now, of course, that was my 5th year guarding, so they all had less experience than me. I had about 6 or 7 rescues, and they had less, so they didn't have the experience I had. So we weren't saying that the most experienced lifeguards were there. Okay? That was not what I was saying. Told everybody. Everybody. Ig has flipped his lip. He's flipped. So the 4th comes. It's a crowded day. This was the overflow or the era after the pavilions, because there weren't many pavilions left. So we'd get the crowds at our beach. And I had 4 towers, so we sat double tower. I had 3 walkers, so we had 11 guards on. It was 2 breaking 11. Okay, I thought that was pretty good. That's almost as many guards as the whole lake had during the pavilion era. And I figured maybe we would stop the ledge. That was my goal. At 4:30 in the afternoon, one of my bay lieutenants calls me. Dave, a woman had a heart attack. She was pretty serious. We pulled her out. She's got good prognosis. Maybe that's your dream. And I said, I wasn't there. The bay is 6 or 7 feet deep. I didn't die for her. How could that be? So by 4:30 in the afternoon, we had some minor rescues. I had pretty much thought that my dream was pure hokum. A boy of 15 hadn't taken his pills. He was an epileptic, 6 feet tall. Him and his father were swimming next to the deep water buoy. The father began to scream. His son was having an attack. He was trying to hold him up. He was a short, heavy man. The son was much taller and bigger than him. He couldn't hold them up. The guards did go out. They carried in the father. They didn't even see the boy. An epileptic will drown under a minute. Now, how do I know this? Because at Yaphank Lake on Long Island, I had a rescue of a epileptic girl. She was only 30 feet from me. I managed to get her in time. Okay? I stayed with her my finger in her mouth. At the time, the view was if they swallow their tongue, they are going to drown. Now they have all kinds of other views. But as I held her with my thumb, she was biting my thumb like crazy, and eventually the paramedics came and she survived. But at Lake RONKONKOMA, we were 30 yards away, so we didn't have a chance. We didn't have a chance. Okay. We dove, all of us, trying to find the body. We expected that he was gone. We couldn't even get down to some of the depth of the water, because your body goes down in about 10, 11 feet of water on the ledge, and then it slides down into the very deep water. So the police grappled him up after I gave the signal. But I said, I'm going to take one more dive myself. I went down to the 11 or 12 foot of water. I followed the ledge in a 50-degree angle down to the very deep water. I probably was in 35 to 40 foot of water. I was out of there. I couldn't see which way was up or down. I was panicking for my own life. I then began to follow my bubbles to the surface. And the firecrackers went off. He was grappled up. We all cried. I had cleared the beach and the water before that. And I said to the papers that covered it and to everybody, this is not going to happen again in my time. I'm going to prevent it. The princess took him, and I'm not going to allow it to happen. Of course, people expected that that's what David Igneri had to say if he was in a lifeguard for many more years. And in the book, I call it the next chapter, Becoming a Scientific Lifeguard. Nobody could swim in 11 foot of water in any beach I was in charge of. The only beach I couldn't control sometimes was the ocean. We had 2 ocean beaches. There will be a backup man in the area by the tower at all times. We didn't have that in the early years. if there's 12 people in the water, a second lifeguard has to go on the tower. And another backup man has to come. Now, the town didn't like that because they had to hire more guards. But I had such quasi-military power at that time. And the head guard, Phil Marion, he's passed on now for years, but he was my football coach. And he's the one that hired me and trained me. So he went along with it. So the town said, fine. The town said, fine. The late 70s, two of my lifeguards, Tony Patello, now a social studies teacher in Central, Bill Thieben, his father played pro ball, he played in Europe, big guy, about 6'5", was sitting on the middle tower. The lake had closed, they went and get a couple of beers, they were sitting on the middle. And something was coming across the lake, about 50 people saw it. It was light. Light was coming across the lake. As it got closer, they realized it was a woman. It was a female. She was walking on top of the water and praying down through the water. The legend says before and after a drowning, and there had been one, the princess prays to Manitou, the Algonquin. Now, there was so much light, you couldn't tell exactly what she was wearing, although a Suffolk Life article in December of 1977 said she was wearing a white gown. But it is known that Native American women either stole or given European clothes. Okay? Tony Patillo and Bill Thieben and all the others that looked at that thought that they saw the princess. She walked on the water all the way across to the protected beach on the south side of the lake. The two lifeguards by this time had jumped off the tower and were in their cars out of the parking lot. Now there were many people, including myself, that say that was the princess. Now, Michael Ebert in his book discusses, he did a book that he didn't publish, but it is well written. I used it as one of my sources. He sells it on the computer, on the internet. He says that as part of the legend, the lake is turbulent before and after a drowning, generally, and he mentions this apparition as the princess. I do believe now it was the princess. Okay, so the princess could be fact. I went to paranormal people doing this book, mediums, people who believe in such things. They said curses are as real as you walking to the corner. You know, people who are good at the paranormal tactics could put a spell on you, put a curse on you. Okay, so the princess might be real. Now, by this time in my career, I was becoming well known. Whether I deserved it or not, it's up to you to believe or not to believe. But papers were coming out of the woodwork. TV stations wanted me on. I was on Channel 12. I was on Channel 4. I was on Channel 56. Okay. All the papers in Suffolk County wanted to write my story. They came down to the beach. Okay. So what do you think about this legend? I said, I believe in it. You believe in it? I do. I said, but if this princess comes to my beach, she's going to die a second time. I call her out. I make war on her. And drownings were still occurring all over the lake, but not on the protected beach where I was guarding. In fact, the lake is not exactly a clean body of water. every few years it closes because of pollution. People said to me, how could you swim it? So I swam it 1,760 times since 1963. My biggest year was 1991. I went across it 120 times. Now I'm an old, slow man. I did 37 this last summer. The last time I went across last summer was October 3rd. My wife had hurt her leg, okay? So she usually drives me, you know, and then waits for me on the other side. She couldn't drive. So I called the cab. I was on one beach. On one side, I called the cab to take me to the other side. So he goes, you're the lake swimmer, aren't you? And I go, yeah. He goes, so you're going to swim today? It's October 3rd, it's going to be cold. I said, nah, I'll make it across. So he gets to the other side, I'm ready to go. Hey, even you are not going to swim it today. It's crazy. I said, I'm going to swim it. Anyway, I start out for the middle. I get to the middle, I can tell that I'm getting hypothermia. This was a wrong move. That Gabby was right. I swam to the edge, back to the edge. I look up. I'm at Lighthouse, which is only about maybe 300 yards, you know, to finish the lake. I said, Dave Igneri doesn't leave the water because it's cold. I sucked it up and swam the rest. Okay. Now, the princess and I felt that because by this time, by the late 80s and the 90s, she was a real person. She was a real, whatever, apparition or ghost or whatever. But she hadn't taken anybody on my beach. Now, actually, one guy came up to me during the pollution. I forgot what I was going to talk about there for a second. But, you know, the lake was closed because of pollution. And I had 2 guards there. And the rest of the lifeguards had to go to other beaches unless they wouldn't get paid. And I told those 2 guys, you can't let anybody in. But I was swimming it every day anyway. And people said, how come you're swimming it? I said, I built the resistance. I'm not going to get sick from this. You know, if I was going to get sick, I would have got sick years ago. So anyway, this guy comes up to me and he says, look, that's not fair. Because you're lifeguard here, you could swim it and we can't swim. That's not fair. I should be able to go in if you went in. I said, I tell you what, I'll come out off municipality property.
If
you want to swim it,
no,
I'm not going to stop you if you do it off my beach.
No, wait.
So we took all the stuff and he went, you know, off the beach.
It's my Ernest, my Evan, I'm good. What's my?
They couldn't find him the next day.
Santa!
And the day after. His family came up to me and they said, Dave, I heard that he was talking to you about this and he was quite annoyed that I said, yeah, that's what happened. So they said, we think he went down over there. You know, so I said, okay, I'll bring the lifeguards that I do have and we'll dive. And we dove. But again, you know, we couldn't get down 40 feet or 45 feet. We didn't have any aqua on.
Somewhere.
So they called the police. Police divers came down, they dove the whole area, they dove for hours. Professional skin diver types.
Yeah.
They said to me, the family, I guess he's not there. I guess that we were wrong. And I said, don't think that's the case. I hope it isn't. I hope he's just someplace else. Maybe he had a little amnesia. Maybe he has a new girlfriend and he didn't tell you about. But his stuff was found on the beach, Dave. The police had no lights. They didn't have any lights. So, in in 45-foot water, he stayed down 13 days, approximately 4 foot a day, as I said, and he came up at, one of the beaches off my town property. So the princess was still active, but I was getting more and more frightened that I'd have to put up with having another death on one of my beaches, which would basically be my fault. This was in the 90s. My last year with the town was 1994. So we go to the last chapter. The princess wanted her revenge, but the ferry was late. I'm telling you the whole book, you're not going to want to buy it. But maybe you'll buy it anyway, and if you don't buy it, well, such is life. It's now written down so people could read it long after I'm gone. And maybe this book will even catapult me to be one of the most famous lifeguards in American history. You never know. Phil Merriam, my mentor, 6'4", 250 pounds, huge man. He said, Dave, you've always been the best trainer of lifeguards. By the 3rd or 4th year you worked for me, you trained everyone. He said, now you become maybe the best. He said, how did you do that? I said, I focused in. Because Phil was leaving. That was his last year. He was on his 3rd or 4th life. He went up to New England someplace. But anyway, he cried and he said to me, Dave, I always thought the best lifeguard would be 6'5". Anyway, getting back to the princess. I believed in her so much by this time, and I never saw her. I didn't see the apparition in 1977. Others told me about it. That I said she's going to try to take somebody on my beach before I retire. It's going to be on my beach, and I'm going to be responsible for that death. So this is what this last chapter is about. I ran with this friend of mine for years. We weren't world-class runners, but I was a runner-swimmer, so every Sunday we would meet and go for 12 miles. When it was 0, and it was, or it was 100, we ran that distance. Then we would, I would do some one-arm push-ups, which I'm pretty famous for. We'd have a cup of coffee and we'd talk about old times. This friend of mine, Jeff, and I had shared rescues together. We shared them at the lake and we shared them on Fire Island. So we did this every Sunday. But in the summertime, I had to work on Sunday, so I couldn't do this run. So Jeff would come down to the lake at 6:10 after the beach closed, and we would do a couple of miles together, and then we would swim back. So by 6:30, 6:40, we'd be swimming back. Okay? So it was about a 2-mile, 3-mile run and a mile swim. So I actually believe now that's when the princess was going to drown this man. I wasn't going to be there, but I would swim in. That day, I had been called from the town offices. Dave, the ocean guards at Fire Island all called in sick. You're going to have to go yourself. Find 2 other guards to go with you and guard that day. I only could find one that was certified. You have to take a special test to be an ocean guard. And so we went over. We had a little problem. The ocean was down. I was on the tower the whole day just about because there's only 2 of us. But, the day ended without any catastrophe. because it was such a crowded day, they had to send extra ferries to bring all the people back, and they had to wait our turn. They had to wait our turn. And I didn't get back to the mainland, and I figured Jeff had left RONKONKOMA, okay, because I didn't show up. This was before cell phones and so on. But I got in my car, and I drove to RONKONKOMA, and there's Jeff waiting for me. Okay. We were going to start our run and swim. In my book I say, spirits don't know everything. They just don't know everything. They think they know everything, but they don't know everything. She thought we were swimming back. I was right there, 100 yards away, in the bathroom. A cry is heard from within the crowd, a plaintive, frightened call, and life and death will hold its breath beyond Rainer's hole. Jeff took, a buoy. He started swimming out to the middle of the lake. There was a number of people out there in a boat and swimming around the boat, so we assumed that's where it was. I was going to follow him with a surfboard. I grabbed the surfboard, ran out to the middle tower. I was just about to put the surfboard in. Please help me. And the mother, his wife, and the two girls are crying like you wouldn't believe. It's not in the middle of the lake. Where is it? Threw the surfboard down. Started checking my surroundings. And there he was, behind the buoy, right in front of the middle tower, about 30 yards out. Jeff! I see him! I see him! Turn around! Jeff heard me. He turned around. I started swimming towards him from the beach. Jeff got there first. Igneri never lies. I could have wrote it that I got there first. He grabbed Jeff to put him in a hold, but Jeff parried him. I got there. We double yoked him in. People on the beach were cheering and everything. The wife gave me kisses. The daughter gave me kisses.
Oh.
The princess wanted her revenge, but the ferry was late. That's how this book ends. In the coming years, she's tried to take people on that beach and throughout the lake. In 2000, 6 years after I left, a kid did drown right on that municipality beach. Okay? Of course, I wasn't around. Okay? In 2012, there was a drowning off Smithtown Beach, off the county park. A young fellow in his 40s, I guess, something like that, young to me. Went out for some kind of a toy and then tried to carry it to shore. One of these boats that goes through, whatever, through some kind of mechanism from shore, and he drowned. Now, were these drownings random drownings that were going to occur? Or because there hasn't been any other drownings in that time period? Or has the curse been lifted? Last summer, just before I went in on one swim, big tall guy, 6'5", comes up to me. "You're David Igneri, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "But aren't you afraid of the princess?" And I said to him, "She's more afraid of me." Okay. So basically, that's the end of the story.